In this episode, I'm going to use lots of stainless steel parts that I made to turn this into this. Stay tuned. There it is. Okay. You may have found yourself with some free time. And here's the thing. One of the most crucial factors that influences the completion of a restoration project is knowing how and when to make the most of free time. So run with it. You might find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile before you know it. So the last time I had made some stainless steel bits and pieces to replace the rusted factory originals, and the only thing that had held me up was waiting for a roll of stainless steel MIG wire. And now it's time to put it all together. Amongst this glorious collection of bits and pieces are these stainless steel hose clamps that I went to great lengths to get, but when they arrived, the actual bolt in them is just zinc plated, and I don't see the point. So I got some stainless steel bolts, cut them to size, and now we've got some hose clamps worth salvaging when the rest of the car falls apart. The only thing I've replaced on this whole fuel setup is the accumulator, and it's a spendy thing. But I gotta tell you, it's made a hell of a difference to the starting of the car. So with only a small pile of bolts left that we'll feed to the rust god, it's time to move on. And I moved on to the axles. These CV boot clips, they come in varying degrees of quality. These ones wouldn't be the greatest, and it just makes seating them that much better a job if you curve out the flattened ends of them. And again, after some test fitting, knocking down a couple of teeth on them will help them seat better too. But we've got a few things to do before we get to fitting these. So let's do that. Just one small circlip locates the axle inside the differential. At the hub end it's a bolt, and aside from having to drop the rear diff cover, it's as simple as that if you ever want to remove your rear axles. these pots were specified from the factory full of oil, and in the Mercedes technical bulletins, oil is all that's recommended. So that's what they're getting. Okay, last time I was very proud of myself having made up these copper brake lines and replaced all of the brake lines in the back of the car. And it wasn't long after that I realised that they were actually just straight copper and not the cupro nickel that I assumed they were. So I ordered some of that. And now we've got some brake lines that exceed the pressure requirements of this braking system by a long way. Cupro nickel is what you'll hear these lines being called, or cunifer. And the cunifer brand name is literally the symbols of the three elements from the periodic table: copper Cu, nickel Ni, and iron Fe, with an R on the end to make it more palatable. Cunifer. Sounds like a character from an 80s fantasy movie. Oh no, Falcor, we must save the princess, but Cunifer's cut our brake lines. Oh no. I got to admit, it took a bit of head scratching to figure out what sequence I needed to follow to get this rear subframe back in. And I was right the first time. The diff should go up first, and that gives you the proper angle on the two forward mounts on the subframe itself. Because it's quite difficult to get the two rubber mounts to stay in that subframe if you do what I did and give them a light smear of silicone grease. It was inevitable, and the time came I had to revisit the whole bump stop issue, so I found a piece of box section that almost identically matched the proportions of the remains of the old bump stops from this car. And after some careful fabrication, they're smart enough looking things, which I managed to magnetize. I didn't really. But it looks like I did. So you should believe me. Link. Alright, let's tackle some of the rust issues up front. If you're ever going to look at one of these cars, these are the areas you should look in. Underneath the bonnet, right in the corner where the bonnet hinges are, there is a channel that handles all of the water that runs forward off the roof and down the windscreen. It's literally behind and under the hinges for the bonnet. And if it goes here, you will have a wet interior. The thing about W123s is, when the water comes in, any water that hits the front footwell actually runs into the rear footwell. So if you have damp carpets in the back of your car, chances are the water is coming from the front. Okay, now you're going to see the difference a decent welder makes. This repair was done with the old gasless MIG machine. And I always assumed my skill level just needed to come up a bit. But in reality, there are much more technical things going on in the differences between a gas shielded machine and a non-gas shielded machine. That means it's very difficult to get a smooth weld with the lesser machine. From this point on in the repair, it's my lovely new Artec gas shielded MIG, and the difference speaks for itself. It's a joy to use a decent machine. Okay, with the cavities waxed, and while we wait for some layers of paint to dry, A bit of a compulsion buy landed in the form of some lowering springs. These are minus 50mm springs for a W123. Bought, not cut. And to be very honest, I just decided, hey, I want to have a bit of fun with this thing, so let's just take a punt and see what we get. Because I have a feeling they're going to be too low. I am not going to start cutting or rolling arches, so we've got to be able to make these things work without having to resort to picking up an angle grinder or a tin snips, or a hammer for that matter. So, the mistake I made on the diff. Yeah, how about sealing the diff up before you put the axles in it? And the brain donor award goes to Georgie. I'd just like to thank the universe for making me, my family, the Proclaimers for walking that 500 miles, setting an example for all of us, Black Aspirin, Potato Crisps, and of course myself for just being super, super, super smart. Days and days roll by when you're working on cars, and you know, the hardest part sometimes is when there's just no more light left and you have to pack up even though you don't want to. And I had 3 days of false starts here, as in 3 days that I thought each day, today is the day, I'm gonna put a key in the ignition and we are starting this car and going for a spin. And for 3 days, jobs just dragged on, things went wrong, Sod and his law were all over us. But finally, and yeah, with far less of a complete car than I had hoped to have, I was ready for a first start and a shakedown run. We got a little bit more reassembly to do on this thing. There's no rear dampers or anti-roll bar. And the front springs, you might have noticed, haven't gone in yet because, you guessed it, I found the spring mounts were rotten, so I'm waiting on a set of those. But I am going to continue down a mild custom route with this thing, just a few little touches to give it some period style. So turn on your notifications and I'll be back as soon as I can. I'm able to bring you these videos because of the support of my patrons, and that's why I acknowledge each new patron. So without further ado, to Absentee Atom, Andy Thompson, Anthony Murphy, Arvid Carlberg, Austin Shank, Chris Barker, Cornelius Sebt, Daffyd Roderick, David Reason, Danny Carroll, Dennis D. Connor, Derek Byrne, Dominic H., Elliot Preston, Emir Sinanovic, Owen Bambury, Felipe Rogerio, Hugh Evans, Jack Domagala, Jamie Bates, Jonathan Schmidt, Yuka Hakala, Christian Pinoza, Marco Hosio, Mark Pepperdy, Martin Windle, Matt Nieuwenhuizen, Matt Shaw, Nathan Altomer, Ralph Combs, Raul Maryama, Richard Stone, Roald Hackboard, Robbie Mulvaney, Roland Adrian, Russell Fuller Hill, Richard Cunningham, Soren Sloth Moller, Sean Monk, Tom Cole, Will Prescott, and Zam Hexamer. Don't let Kuna forget you, Zam. And also to Will, David, and Ian for sending me things from my wish list, and to all my patrons, thank you for keeping me doing what I love to do. With every one of you, the uncertainty just diminishes that little bit more. If you'd like to lend support to these videos, to my efforts, you'll find a link to my website in the description where all of the options are available and where you can get in touch. Until I see you the next time, I will be working very hard. Stay stuck in, stay safe, and good luck.